2, 1, like I said before.
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everyone, to the Zorich podcast. I am Chris Zorich, and on today's show, we have a Notre Dame alum, Super Bowl champion, and the current analyst for the Chicago Bears, Tom Thayer. Now, before I have Tom Thayer speak, this is one of my idols, mentors. Tom, you don't know this, but when I first got to the Bears, you actually kind of took me, well, you kind of know that part. You took me under your wing, but more importantly, literally every word you said, I hung on to. So you're the reason why I had a 7-year career in the NFL. So everybody, ladies and gentlemen, the Tom Thayer. Thayer, thank you very much for joining us.
Chris, I appreciate that. You know, I think a lot about you because you were probably one of the most famous college football players when I was already playing for the Bears and playing in the NFL, and I was a locally grown kid like you. The first time I met you was at your mom's wake.
I don't remember that, but afterward, I remember we had a conversation about that.
I didn't know you. I've never met you. I've just admired the way you played football on TV, and I knew that we had something in common in our background, Notre Dame and a local. And so I remember I went to the service and I introduced myself to you and expressed my condolences. And I don't know what drew me to it, but I think it was just the admiration of your enthusiasm that you always showed as an undersized guy playing, a sport, but you raised it to heroic levels.
Well, thank you very much. I love that introduction. And before you start making me cry, it's crazy because, and obviously I didn't necessarily remember that, but you actually told that story after the fact that we started to get to know each other. But the idea of kind of that Notre Dame family, which, I thought I knew it all when I was there, but after my mom passed away, and I was so young, and you and other folks in the Chicago area who were Notre Dame alums just kind of opened themselves and embraced me. So literally, I think, again, that's the reason why I just admire you. I admired you. I admire you now, but I admire you so much when I was a young kid because, you didn't have to take me and Mike Stonebreaker underneath your wing. You know what I'm saying? You didn't know us from Adam. We were just two little punk kids who thought we knew everything. But, your willingness, the Notre Dame connection kind of got us together. But enough about me. You're on my
But you know what, Chris? I did have to take you under my wing. And I wasn't taking you under my wing like I had been exalted to some high position. No, it was more of a kinship, of a brotherhood, of a friendship, of that type, and yeah, it just the chances that you guys were from Notre Dame increased the fact that we had a lot more in common. But when you're a guy on a team that that there's a couple guys that are coming in that are good backbone, you got to take them under your wing.
All right. Well, we have just fast forwarded like half my interview, so let me go back. I'm going to go back to the days at Joliet, living in Joliet. And first of all, when did you start getting involved in, I don't know if it was football or basketball or baseball, whatever it was. Do you remember, like, did your brothers push you, your pops push you? Like, how did you get involved in football?
It's a great story. So when I was growing up as a kid, I have an older brother that's 2 years older than me. His name is Rick. And there was a guy in Joliet. His name was Rocky Carnegie. What a great football name. But he was starting the Pop Warner football program.
Okay.
And so he came over and he knew my mom, my family. We had 2 sons. And he goes, hey, I'm going to start a football program. I think this would be perfect for your kids. And so my brother took the first picture ever taken in a full uniform with another kid in our town named Teddy Matichak. And so the two, we still have the picture. And so that was the way we got involved in it. But this is the best story. Thank God for my mom. When I became a Pop Warner football player, you kind of know if you're going to be an offensive lineman or if you're going to be something else. Well, I was that size where I was going to be an offensive lineman. So here I am going to Pershing High School every day in the hot weather at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was a miserable young offensive lineman. And so I would cry. My first 2 years, I cried every day on the way to practice. And so I would try to like hide on my mom or just try to get out of everything. So every day she would take me to practice and I'd be crying. And she'd push me out of the car and she'd say, you'll stop crying when you see your friends. You'll stop crying. And so it was the case. I would be crying. I'd put my helmet on. I'd walk towards the center of Pershing playground. And by the time I got there, the tears would go away and then it would just become football. So if it wasn't for my mom's perseverance, I don't know what I would have turned into, but I can never thank her enough for it because my dad was a working man.
Sure.
He was working 60 hours a week and climbing electric poles every day. So it was my mom, and she was instrumental in the fact that I ever got attached to football.
That is awesome, man. That is a great story. You're right. So I could literally see your mom pushing you out of the car, talking about stop, go, please. Which is interesting because, and again, I'll kind of, we'll get into it later, but it's almost like you're this incredible journeyman who was able to kind of cross 2 leagues in a matter of months. But I think literally that's probably how it started. So again, going back. So you're doing well in high school, obviously, right? I mean, you are being recruited.
Yeah. Oh, the program I came from, Chris, in my 4 years of high school, we only lost 1 game, and we won the state championship. We won the state championship every year. In 2 years ahead of me, my brother was a superstar. He was a fullback. He was recruited by every coach in the nation. And because of the high school program I went to and the feeding of that did to colleges, yeah, it was because of my high school program.
Well, okay, but so before you got to Joliet Catholic, I mean, were they looking? I mean, I don't know how big Joliet is, but I'm assuming it can't be that big. I mean, I'm sure they knew of you and of your family. Like literally, the Thayers are, the kids playing football. Okay, they're now this age. We had Rick. Now it's Tom's turn. Did it happen like that, or I mean, would you just assume you were going to Joliet Catholic?
Oh, I knew I was going to Joliet Catholic. That was the only place I was going to go because I'm the youngest in my family. And at one time, we had 5 kids, and we also had 3 adopted kids. So I was the youngest. Yeah, I was the youngest of all 8. And on Friday night, Joliet Memorial Stadium hosted Joliet Catholic football games. And because they were such a tradition-drenched school, all right, I went to St. Ray's for grade school. I played basketball there. And then you go from St. Ray's, then you kind of go to Joliet Catholic, and that's the progression here in Joliet. And we never threw the ball. We only ran the ball.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, where would you go other than there if you were going to be, you wanted to be an offensive lineman, and that was it.
And so are there any other high schools in Joliet? I mean, I haven't heard any.
There's a lot of, Joliet East, Joliet West, Joliet Central when I was growing up, Bolingbrook, Romeoville, the whole Plainfield school system, Lincoln Way school system. So Providence is a heck of a program. So, yeah, they have some legit programs. When I was growing up, Lockport High School was 33-0 in their basketball. Wow. It had one of the greatest teams in the history of high school sports. So, yeah, the surrounding area, there's a lot of athletes.
That's amazing. Okay, so now you made this transition from grammar school to high school. So you haven't lost any games. I'm sorry, you lost 2 games, one game. Yeah. 1 game in your 4-year career. Geez, you sound like you belong at Notre Dame.
Marian Catholic got beat us 14-6.
And you remember that. And so what year was that?
76.
And you remember that? That's insane.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I remember the one loss that we had my senior year, which kind of knocked us out of the playoffs. But so I understand why you would remember that. So now, I mean, are you thinking about other schools? I mean, what were your final 5 schools? Were you dead set on Notre Dame? Like how did that work?
Well, first of all, I wanted to go to school at the natural grass surface. I didn't want to go to practice every day and practice and play on AstroTurf, because the AstroTurf of my generation, Chris, was a much more brutal surface than it is today.
Okay.
So Purdue had natural grass. Notre Dame had natural grass. I had other trips scheduled to Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Oklahoma or something.
Really?
And once I went to Notre Dame, and Dan Devine brought me into his office, and he presented the option and I couldn't turn it down.
Wait, hold on. So at 18 years old, you're only looking at schools that have grass fields.
Yes, but at that time, Michigan did. Well, no, Michigan did, I think, but I think Wisconsin was the only one that didn't. But it was within 4 hours of home, and I always felt like I was going to be homesick, so I wanted to stay. I wanted to stay close to home.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So your final. I heard Oklahoma in there, Wisconsin, Purdue. Did you take a visit to Purdue? Or?
Yeah, I went to Purdue. Jim Young was the head coach. It was a great facility. Probably would have been my second choice if I didn't, if it wasn't Notre Dame.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned your meeting with Dan Devine. My trip was kind of interesting when I went. Was there anything memorable when you went to Notre Dame? I mean, I've talked to a lot of guys, and a lot of guys like, I hated my trip. It was all about academics. I went everybody else. I went everywhere else. There were girls, partying, everything else. Like, I'm kind of curious. Like, how was your recruiting weekend?
It was a recruiting weekend, Chris. It wasn't the partying. It wasn't warm weather atmosphere. I think it was probably in the middle of February, where it was a couple of degrees below zero, a lot of snow on the ground. Went to a basketball game, met with academic advisors, met with your assistant coach. They weren't selling the school. They were telling you how difficult it was going to be if you made that decision. And because I came from an era where my mom and dad, they didn't go to college. They worked their whole life. So I didn't have this academic influence from my mom and dad telling me this is what you got to do. I just thought, oh my God, Notre Dame has offered me an opportunity to go there. I'm not going to pass it up. And I signed up, and I knew there was a lot of people in my hometown that maybe thought that I was not going to have a great chance to succeed there because of the athletes they recruit, how difficult the academics are. And it kind of fueled the fire. Chris, I wanted to prove everybody wrong academically and athletically.
See, that's really interesting because, I mean, my situations were very similar. My mom, she never went to college, but what instilled into you the need for this academic part? And again, you're 18 years old, parents didn't go to college. Like what was that? Was it, the influence from Joliet Catholic, or did you just know as an 18-year-old, hey, academics are important now?
I wanted to graduate from college so bad. I just, listen, man, I went there to play in the NFL. That was goal number one. Wow, I was not going to be denied. That's what I was there for. However, I felt if I left Notre Dame and I had a diploma at the end, it was just a heck of an accomplishment. And hey, I'm not an A student. I'm begging for C's. I just want to stay eligible. I want to stay above the requirements that Notre Dame set for us. And, I'm not sure. It was difficult. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done from a 17, 18-year-old kid until the time I got out of there. But, man, Chris, what a sense of accomplishment it is when I don't ever look at my diploma. I don't ever wear my Super Bowl ring. But I just love the fact that I know I have a diploma from college.
So, and you're talking to the guy that has diplomas over his shoulder, so I do apologize about that. So give me a great athletic experience that you had at Notre Dame during your career there.
Going to Alabama with Bear Bryant as the head coach and beating them 7-0. You know what, Chris, is you've been introduced at every away stadium that you've ever played at throughout your career at Notre Dame. And boos are unique. I've never heard a louder boo in my career from either the NFL through college than the day we were booed in Alabama.
Wow.
And it was awe-inspiring. And then the next week when we were on the cover of Sports Illustrated, Phil Carter, our running back, was diving over the top that my brother-in-law, who's John Scully, and I were making, and he was leaping over the top of us, and that was the only touch on the game. So that is,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
See, I would have that on my wall. I would have that the cover of that Sports Illustrated on my wall, blown up, like huge.
I'm surprised I don't, but when anybody ever asks me about the neatest football accomplishment or game, I immediately refer to that Alabama game, and I probably should have that picture because it's kind of neat. Because all right, now I'm playing right guard. The center I'm playing next to, John Scully, he ended up marrying my sister. And he went on to have a really nice career at the Atlanta Falcons for 11 years.
Yes, he did, yes.
And now they live in Joliet with their 2 daughters who also went to Notre Dame.
No, that's a great story, man. That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yes.
And I do have to say, they actually, I believe it was him and his daughter created the song.
Well, it's his Kathy Richardson is the young lady that sings the song "Here Come the Irish,"
right?
But it was written by John Scully, and he has a producer friend he works with, Jim Tullio.
Okay.
But yeah, John wrote the music, plays the piano, constructed the whole song, and yeah, it's really neat.
For those folks who may not have heard it, it's called "Here Come the Irish," and although I love our fight song, it's great to rah 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 everything after a game. But when I hear that, I mean, like I'm talking about it now, and look at that, I got chills, man. I'm talking about it right now.
I'm same way,
dude. I love that song, dude. I mean, that song, and it just it pulls at every heartstring of my 4 years, busting my ass, sweat and blood. And every time I hear that song, I literally, and it's crazy because when I was there, they didn't. I mean, when was it created? Because it was created
after you left.
Yeah, right.
I remember they went and filmed the video when Notre Dame was playing Boston College, and so I know the history, but I'm not really sure the date.
Right. Well. So it's amazing. So I don't hear it during my career, but then when I go back, they're playing it, and I'm like on the sideline, like, what the hell is what the? I'm like, let's go, and I'm with the Bears. I'm like, hey, let's go. It is a great. I actually have it on my iPod. I mean, and I have it on my motorcycle. Like literally, and I mean, it's kind of weird riding your motorcycle with that playing. So when it's a long stretch and it's just me on the road, I'll play it, dude, and I'll get so pumped up. And it reminds me, even though the song, I mean, I don't associate the song with a time when I was playing. I associate it with what me and my guys, my teammates, my friends went through during my time there. So, dude, I literally, I think they should adopt that song instead of like the fight song that we have, because I love it.
I agree with you. It's an updated, more modern sound of Notre Dame, because there's so many elements of that song you can gravitate to. I don't get to go to Notre Dame games very much, but I'm watching it on TV. I always hear when they go to their final break, I can hear that song starting. And Kathy Richardson, a Chicago-born singer, just does a beautiful job at it. But then when you hear the bagpipes, and then you hear the sounds of what appears to be like horses coming at you, there's just so many different sounds to that song that pumps you up. And it's not, you don't have to be a Notre Dame fan. You just have to enjoy encouraging music. And I think that's the cool thing about that song.
Well, I could almost, I would love to, obviously you haven't in, I'd love to get John on the show sometime. But I'm kind of curious. I'd love to kind of talk to him about kind of, what he thought about, because I'm assuming a lot of his emotions, a lot of his feelings of playing on the field, win or losing, had to go into that song, because that's how as I mentioned before, I was getting chills when we were talking about it. I mean, it is a song for me. Like, I feel like, at 50, I feel like getting my guys together. We're gonna go out. We're gonna beat somebody's ass, on the field. I mean, it's like the ultimate motivational song for me.
John is a really unique guy. I will set it up where you have him on your podcast.
Oh, great.
He's such an
great.
interesting guy to talk to.
Okay.
He's super intelligent, academic All-American, a trained concert pianist. But, his journey at Notre Dame did not start easy. And I think it's a great lesson for all these young kids, young kids, men and women that play sports. Because he went to Notre Dame, he blew his knee out. Boom. Then he broke his leg. And then all of a sudden, he had a stretch where he stayed healthy, became an All-American his last 2 years, and then went on to play 11 years in the NFL. So he could have tucked his tail between his legs early in his career and just concentrated on academics. He's super brilliant, but he never let the dream of football leave him. And so he inspires me. He's a couple years ahead of me, but I tell you, man, when we used to go on road trips, he always used to find a big lobby with a piano in it. And he would start entertaining the masses, and then people would gather around because they're going, oh, my God, who's playing in this lobby? And here it is, a Notre Dame football player. So, that's my envy of his music ability, it outstretches anything.
That's awesome. If you could please, I mean, I would love to. I would love to kind of talk about that. All right, so you talked about the Alabama game. Give me a moment throughout your time at Notre Dame, a non-athletic moment that kind of has always either stayed with you or something that was important to you during your time there. Non-athletic.
My freshman year, and I remember this, and I tell this story all. My freshman year, you have to take an entry. You have to take some type of exam when you go there. What I did, at least you did as a freshman. I think a placement exam or something.
Okay.
So I was standing on the steps of O'Shaughnessy, and I was talking to this young lady. I just met her for the first time. We're incoming freshmen, and what's your name? She goes, my name is Hannah Storn. So her real name is Hannah Storn, not Hannah Storm from ESPN.
Okay.
And I said, well, Hannah, how you doing? And I said, what are you going to do? What's your goal after Notre Dame? She goes, I'm going to be a female sportscaster. And I go, and I just like you, I go, wow, this is your freshman year. And she goes, no, that's what I'm going to do. And then I remember we stayed friends the whole time we were at Notre Dame. In my first year at Notre Dame, I'm out, and I see her with a recorder doing interviews. And now she's got a sports job in Houston, and I ran into her there. And then everybody knows what Hannah is, turned out being one of the most brilliant sportscasters of multiple sports of any field. And Chris, it's just amazing how confident she was that first day I met her. And then it's the same thing, Dave Duerson was my roommate at Notre Dame.
Wow.
I've never met a more confident 17-year-old person in my life than Dave was. And I was kind of like inspired by him because I was 17 years old and I knew nothing. He was a 17-year-old that traveled the world through this All-American band he played in. He was a super decorated athlete. He told me the first day I met him, I'm going to play football and I'm going to start for 4 years, which he did. So,
wow.
It's those people that we've never come across in our life. We meet them the first day there and we never forget about them the rest of our life.
That's insane. I've never heard that story. You're listening to the Zorich podcast with Super Bowl champion, Chicago Bear, Notre Dame alum, quote for me, one of my mentors, Tom Thayer. All right, so now Dave was from Gary, Indiana, right?
No, he was from Muncie, Indiana.
Oh, Muncie, Indiana. I'm sorry. So I didn't realize y'all were freshmen together. I didn't know that.
Yeah, incoming freshmen together. And like I said, he was a guy that inspired me because of his confidence made me more confident. And that's one of the things that I cherished about him most.
That's crazy. That is crazy. What dorms you guys live in?
Flanner.
Oh, okay.
It was
Well.
I think it was the only one at the time that offered air conditioning. And I could not go to one of those other, the old school dorms, Alumni Hall, Dillon Hall, Morrissey, one of those, and not have air conditioning, man. I don't sweat well.
So I don't know if you remember Kent Graham.
Of course.
Okay, well, Kent Graham was this All-American athlete from Wheaton North, and just this amazing athlete. We actually met each other at a banquet. He was my year, and he pulled me into what I thought was a great dorm called Soren Hall.
Right.
This is where the university started. It was built in, I think, 1846 after they started
Father Soren.
School. Father Soren, the president in the dorm lives there. What I had no idea was not only was there no air conditioning, the president of the university lived on the first floor.
Yes.
And we were in what were called the bowling alleys, which, if you could imagine, about 16 feet lengthwise, but the width literally was maybe 7 feet or 8 feet. Now, it was ridiculous. We had a sink in there, but it was ridiculous.
Yep.
So you talk about air conditioning. I'm jealous because I had 4 years of no air conditioning. We had to go to like, I don't think Walmart. I forgot what there. I think it was Walgreens. We had to go buy one of those box fans and put the box fan in the window because we had absolutely no air conditioning. So I'm jealous.
Did you have elevators?
Tom, really? Elevators?
Well, no. See, those dorms that don't have elevators, and then during the football season, after running at practice, then you go in there, climb 3, 4, 5. Like I had a class in the Golden Dome building with no elevators, and I had it on the 4th floor. I mean, it'd take me out of some practices. I was so tired.
So what I think was so cool, and it's funny because I love talking to folks from Notre Dame about really kind of or at least for me, kind of walking across the quad. And you grew up in a blue collar town, and I kind of grew up on the south side of Chicago, but I never thought, like, I don't know for you, but I could never imagine being in kind of a peaceful place. And it's interesting because I would remember walking across the campus, even though I was going to go to practice to get the crap beat out of me. I just remember sometimes like how lucky I was. I don't know. Did you ever have that feeling when you were there?
Yes. Walking to class was always a nervous time for me because it was just, the academics part of it. But, Chris, I remember walking from Flanner to the stadium entrance on game day mornings. And I walked with my family, my mom and dad, and, whoever I could get tickets for. In that walk through that campus on that day, passing the library, and just the words of encouragement, because we didn't walk together as a team. We just came from our dorms individually.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
And so I would say, okay, I like to get there early. So my family would get there. They would walk with me from Flanner to the stadium. I would go in, and then they would have their pregame fun. But, man, that Saturday morning walk was inspiring to me.
So now that I'm thinking about it, you were the first person in the locker room on game day, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yes.
I do remember that. I literally, if the game was at noon, I swear you had to be there. I want to say maybe like 9-ish, 8.
I never took a team bus to a game.
I remember.
My whole career. I took a cab every single game, and I would get there obnoxiously early. I still do the same thing as a broadcaster. If there's a noon start, I will go to the locker room at 6 a.m. and make coffee for Tony Medlin. So by the time anybody gets there, there's a coffee made, and I just love that peaceful time. I like that time.
Still.
Yeah. Yes. Still.
That's insane.
I know it is, but so am I.
I remember the first time the first home game, I went in there and, I'm thinking, okay, cool, whatever. And I think you may have already been dressed, or either you may have had your pants on, your bottoms on, right? So
Yeah.
and I'm thinking to myself, okay, we just walked in. What the hell? What time did this guy? So I remember that now. That's crazy. And then eventually you kind of told me how you liked it. So you actually started that. Did you start that in high school or was it Notre Dame?
No, it was at the in the pros because Notre Dame. I took a bus every week. You know what's funny is, so we were playing in the Super Bowl, not in New Orleans. I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but I want to tell you something because I left the hotel and I took a cab to the stadium by myself. And so nowadays, if you go to a Super Bowl, you're not going to get within a mile of the stadium because of security reasons. Sure. I took a cab by myself to the back tour of the Superdome. I got out. When I stepped into the Superdome, the lights weren't even on inside yet. I walked across the length of the field and went in the locker room and started,
That's insane.
Yes. So, yeah, I've always taken a cab.
Okay, so then what is it? I mean, it's. I mean, hearing you make coffee, it's great, but do you feel that? You need to block everything out, or is it? When it's game day for you, you've started the night before, or you started that week. What is it that kind of allows you to feel comfortable being there 6 hours before a game?
Anxiety. I have such anxiety when I'm sitting at home and I'm watching traffic build, or I'm putting in my mind that traffic is already 10 miles backed up and I'll never get to the game.
Really?
So I get there, and once I get there, and I am there so early that, sometimes the security people aren't in position yet, that I get there and all anxiety leaves me. Then I'm just in the comfort zone. I don't have to worry about any outside circumstances. So it is about getting there without the anxiety of worrying about traffic. I'm still that same way. I still have that same traffic anxiety. However, I beat it, and even when I'm broadcasting and we're playing an away game now, they have a bus that brings equipment staff so much earlier than the games. That's the bus I take.
And I'm sure everybody's like, who the hell is this guy? You're on the bus like, yeah, I'm ready to go. They're like, excuse me, you're not part of our staff. Who are you?
Oh yeah, I've been on that bus since 1985. So
all right, okay. So now, and I want to get into this because when you first told me this, I did not believe you because it's impossible. Because the amount of wear and tear our bodies take just in a normal season. So can you explain to everybody who's watching, because it's so interesting, kind of your journey to eventually the Bears, but can you talk to us about what happened with your draft and where you ended up? And literally, I want you to talk about the time between your last USFL team and going with the Bears.
Well, I came out of college in the first year there was ever a bidding war between USFL and NFL.
Right.
And so I was walking out of the weight room at Notre Dame about a week before the draft.
Okay.
And one of the Bears scouts came up to me. His name was Jim Palmer, who was a great guy. He says, "Hey, I got some good news for you." He goes, "We had a mock draft this weekend. And we drafted you in the 4th round." And I go, "4th round? That's a bunch of crap." I said, "I'm not going in the 4th round." And so 2 days later, George Allen, who was the head coach of the Chicago Blitz,
right,
he called me up and says, "Hey, we're really interested in making you an offer, and we're going to give you a guaranteed contract for 3 years. So you're not going to get cut. It's a personal service contract. We want you to come and play for the Chicago Blitz." And I was so angry that they told me that they drafted me in the 4th round of the mock draft. I said, "All right, I'm gone." But then he goes, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" Back then, the NFL draft was not covered. It was on a Tuesday, and you just got the picks announced, and then they called you.
Okay.
So it's Tuesday. George Allen says, "Hey, do me a favor. Don't announce you signed with the USFL because we want to make a little splash to see who drafts you in the NFL." Okay. So I go there. Can you turn that light on? Thanks.
There you go. Okay.
Yes. Sorry. So I go there, and George makes me a deal. I can't turn down. Don't say anything. So now it's Tuesday of the draft. go to the USFL facility to start practicing and making announcements that I'm going to sign there. A couple minutes later, the Bears make a draft choice in the 4th round, and they announce it's me. But the press that was already at the USFL, they went up to the Bears draft facility, and they thought they were joking. And they said, he just signed with the USFL.
Wow.
And so George got exactly what he wanted to. He got a little bit of a splash,
Wow.
and it just so happened that I was drafted by the Bears. But back then, they had your rights for 4 years if they drafted you. Even though I was going to play 3 years in the USFL, I was still going to sign with the Bears at the end of that time.
I didn't know that. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was the good and the bad. I was fortunate that the Bears had my rights, and I was going to the Bears. I may have lost some money because if I made an announcement early and nobody drafted me, then I would have been a free agent.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So,
okay. But at 21, what do you know? Did you even have an agent? Was it even okay? All right. Did your agent say that it was a good idea to do?
He did. He says, "Hey, listen, I would recommend this to any client. They're offering you a guaranteed deal. You could go to the Bears and get cut, and you could be out of luck." And so the USFL made me a fair deal, and once they made it guaranteed, it was really too hard to turn down. And I, as soon as I learned the playbook, I was playing. So the next week, we were playing the Washington Federals. I was 20, and the guy I was playing against was 40.
No way.
Yes, his name was Coy Bacon, and he was a defensive lineman. And I was going, man, I just can't believe the age difference.
That is insane.
Yes.
Wait, so when did you turn 21? When's your birthday?
August 16th.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
That's insane. You were 20 years old.
I was playing the second semester senior year, and then I was 20 because I remember the first time going out with my teammates, I wasn't legal to drink.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and they had a lot of fun with it, telling
everybody that. Right, exactly.
You can't drink, card them.
All right, so now, please explain, because when you again, I just don't believe this. You finished your last season in the USFL what month in 85?
I finished July in 85.
Okay. So training camp in the NFL starts in August, correct?
Well, so my last game in the USFL, I think, was July 27th.
Okay.
And I played in Arizona, and it was like 113 degrees at kickoff. So I played that game, Chris, on a Saturday night at Tempe and ASU Stadium. After the game was over, my car was packed. I got into my car and drove straight through nonstop to Madison, Wisconsin. I bought a scooter, and I drove it from Madison, Wisconsin to Platteville, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Started practice Monday morning.
Okay.
Full pads.
Come on. All right, folks. For first of all, if anybody who's ever played any football that's watching, everybody's saying this is bullshit. Because when you first told me, I thought, Tom, I swear to God, I thought you were lying. First of all, you've finished a full season in the USFL.
Right.
And you literally had, now, I'm remembering now, you had a day in a fucking car. Excuse me. Wow. Sorry. A day in a car, and you practiced on Monday.
Yes.
And that year didn't stop in December. That year, it was the year you guys went to the Super Bowl.
Correct.
So
it was a year and 16 days straight. So it went from January 16th to January 26th.
How was that? Okay. How
you would have done the same thing?
No, that's my body.
That's the way you were born and you were bred. That's the life. That's the opportunities we took advantage of. Yes, sir.
There's no that's impossible. No one does that. Who does that?
There wasn't very many opportunities. I think I'm not tooting my own horn because there was a couple other guys that came on to play a couple weeks or games into the NFL season.
Okay.
But going the whole USFL season and going the whole NFL season all the way to the Super Bowl, I was just fortunate to be that guy. You know, I was young, I was hungry, I was energetic, I was full of life, and I was just excited to be in Chicago.
You just finished a full season, a
Yep.
full professional season, and you're going to do another one.
We had, and the USFL was nice. We didn't play any preseason games, but we had 18 regular season games. So it was a little bit different.
What did you play? I mean, how many games is that calendar year then for you?
It was like 45 or 46.
Jesus.
You know, 18, a playoff game, and then the 4 preseason games, then the 16 regular season games, and then the playoffs and the Super Bowl.
Come on. I mean, that has to be a record. I mean, I don't know. You need to talk to Larry May or somebody with the Bears to research that, because that is unheard of.
Yeah, but again, Chris, it was just the time. It was the opportunity. You know,
Sure.
The USFL was in some a troubled state financially. So I knew the best for my future was going to the NFL and trying to earn a position there. And so I had this guy that I was playing with at the time in the USFL. His name was Jerry Sullivan. He grew up in Chicago, went to University of Illinois, played about 10 years for the Cleveland Browns, and then played for the Bears for a little while. And he gave me NFL reality. He wasn't sugarcoating anything. And excuse me, he was telling me, you know, this Jay Hilgenberg kid is pretty damn good. You know, what position are you going to play? And he's starting to tell me about the talent there. And so it wasn't a foregone conclusion that I was going there. I went there thinking that I was going to get cut as much as I could make it.
All right. Okay. So that's amazing. You're listening to the Zorich podcast with Notre Dame alum, and we just talked about Super Bowl champion Tom Thayer. If you'd like to listen to this interview and other interviews, please check out my YouTube page at Chris Zorich 50 and click subscribe if you like it. So, okay, now you are a hometown kid, and you now have a roster spot on the Chicago Bears. You got to be freaking out.
Yes. But, you know, it just, you know, it increased the pressure. It really increased the pressure, you know, because when I went to college, I felt I had a lot of pressure on myself because I wanted to stay academically eligible. I wanted to satisfy all the requirements, and I wanted to be a starter, and I wanted to play. And then ultimately I wanted to make it to the NFL. So when you went to professional football, the pressure never lessened. It actually increased. So with the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Joliet Herald News, the Southtown Economist, whatever you want to talk about, there was a reflection of you if they wrote a negative, line or something about you. So I just didn't want that to happen. And like I said, I'm the youngest of my family. I could really dictate a different fate for the rest of my family if I could be successful playing football. And that meant my nieces and nephews and everybody coming behind me.
And of course they did. And so you have a chance to go on and win a Super Bowl. So there's a poster behind you that I've been admiring for a couple seconds. And that one. First of all, as a sophomore, I was a sophomore in '85 in high school. Sorry, Tom. But I, like everyone else, just went nuts about the Super Bowl and everything. And not that you would know this, but there was a young Chris Zorich out on Daly Plaza as y'all were climbing through the roof on the buses, and I was climbing on a light pole just so I could see everybody. So my understanding and my interpretation of the Bears during that time is strictly from a fan. And I had I think it was a car dealership poster, I don't remember, but it was, I think there was the whole offensive line, right? Was in the poster.
Yes.
It was
Black and Blues Brothers.
Yes.
Yes.
So and during that time, McDonald's had these football cards, and they were big. They weren't like the regular size football cards. They were the big ones for like every Big Mac you buy, whatever you got a card. And I remember having that poster of the Black and Blues Brothers, which I didn't know that Tom Thayer was on there, and all of y'all's football cards from McDonald's on my wall as a kid. So it was amazing for me to have a chance to watch you guys play. As someone who went through it, and I know you talk about you don't wear your Super Bowl ring, but can you just share a little bit about that journey throughout that year? I mean, I know it's a lot, but I mean, there were some ups and downs. There was a loss, but then you guys played this incredible game. I mean, just kind of, share with us a little bit about how that season transpired for you guys.
For me, the first time I stood in the huddle with Walter Payton, and they call a play that your block is instrumental of him having success or not, I couldn't get over it. When I would stand in the huddle, I would stare at him, and I was so amazed, enamored, respectful, just everything of, to me, the greatest football player at that time, and now I'm in the same huddle. So that was a big hurdle to overcome, because I had to lose it. I had to yell break, turn around, and then I look, and there's Ming and Hamp and Otis and Wilbur and Singletary, and you better get serious right now. So it was that, Chris. Like, I'm the fan, same as you. I remember the one and only time in my life I ever got to go to a Bears game. It was a preseason game in August back in the 70s against the Green Bay Packers. And then I'd be just a fan of football, the fan of the Bears, the fan of, like I said, Walter Payton, and then being able to become teammates with them. It was, initially it was an experiment, an experience that you'll never forget.
That's I can't even imagine. I mean, that's as a kid in the Chicago area, having a chance to be in the huddle with and blocking for Walter. I can't even. I mean, and I know you said you kind of got over it real quick, but I would just be like, my first play, I would just be all like staring at me. Tom, get your ass down, get down, okay? I mean, it would have been an amazing experience.
I remember the first time a photographer took a picture, and it was Mark Bortz and I pulling to the outside, and Walter Payton's carrying the ball behind us, and he's turning the corner. Neither of his feet are touching the ground. And so I remember seeing the shot and staring at it for a long time, and standing up, walking to his locker, and just begging him to sign it for me. And I mean, every single time I would get a picture with him, I would just beg him to sign it and stuff.
Oh my God!
And it's weird being in the locker room asking for an autograph of a teammate that you have so much respect for. That it was such a cool experience.
God, that's crazy, man. That's crazy. Okay, so I mean, you guys have a loss. You guys have a chance to play in the Super Bowl. I so didn't mean to kind of wash over the rest of the season, but you guys are playing the Patriots, and I mean, the Bears have this defense, and obviously you guys played very well. But I mean, what was that experience like? I mean, representing Chicago in a game that was just, I mean, it's the best game anybody could possibly ever see. Not even, I mean, being in a Super Bowl, and a lot of folks don't understand. It is very rare that you have a chance to play in a Super Bowl. I mean, lightning, I mean, everything, the ducks in a row, everything has to happen in order for your team to. And I say that because I never went. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people that are great players in the NFL, in the Hall of Fame, that never went to a Super Bowl. So as a hometown Chicago kid, I mean, how was that? I mean, how did that feel for you?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you remember your worst play in football?
I do remember getting my ass kicked, yes.
So you do. So no, because this is a true story. The second or third play of the game, we fumbled. Walter Payton got hit early, and before he controlled the ball, Garen Veras hit him, and that was my fault. So we have a combination block between me and Keith Van Horn. We sustain a block on the line of scrimmage, and then we move up to the linebacker. So as we were blocking each other, I thought the linebacker was coming. I left Keith too early. Garen Veras split us and hit Walter Payton before he had control of the ball, and it was a fumble. I know it's my fault. So I'm a Chicago kid. I'm walking off the field, Chris. I'm thinking, I'm a Chicago kid, and I'm going to be responsible for the Bears losing the Super Bowl. And that is, to me, the worst play of my career. Not because it's in the Super Bowl, but I felt bad for the results that caused Walter. It was a bad anticipation of fundamentals by me, and it was a fumble. And I will never that's the worst play of my career to me. And but then things turned around. We ended up scoring. However, when it's the second or third play of the game,
you have no idea. Right.
I'm just completely, and the offensive line coach, what happened? And I go, it was my fault. And he goes, don't let it happen again.
Well, but sorry, how did you snap? I mean, how did you snap out of that funk? I mean, like you said, right? So you caused Walter to fumble. I mean, I'm sorry, your play. I mean, you're going back to the sideline, going, holy shit! Like I'm a Chicago, like you said, I'm a Chicago kid, and I just lost the Super Bowl for the Bears. I mean, how did you get out of that?
I kind of went and explained it to Dick Stanfeld, who was our offensive line coach. And he was one of the greatest offensive guards in the history of professional football. So he kind of just talked me off the ledge. And he explained, all right, just remember, go over your fundamentals. Go over what we've been practicing all this time and just, follow. Just don't let that happen again. And so it did. It took a more positive spin. McMahon recognized some of the perceived weaknesses of New England and how to take advantage of them. Sure. And then, things turn around. But still, my 4 years at Notre Dame, we never beat USC. That's my biggest tarnishment in my career. But my worst play ever is that play in the Super Bowl.
Wow. Well, and the fact that you can remember it so vividly, and I could see you kind of going through the motions. So I'm sure that's that. I mean,
they played the Super Bowl this year during the pandemic on TV on a Sunday.
Okay.
And I had to get up and leave the room during that play.
Did you really?
I did. I still can't.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
I just can't get over how bad that was.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And obviously, I mean, y'all went on to beat the crap out of New England, but. I mean, wow, that's amazing, Tom. That is absolutely amazing. Okay, so you come back to Chicago. You are a Super Bowl champion. You're a Chicago kid. I mean, life had to be great.
It just changed. It completely changed, because we came back from the Super Bowl and it was evident because we are coming from the airport through the city to see all the people that gathered on such a crappy cold day and how long some of those people must have been standing there. So you have both the excitement of the accomplishment, but you're going, wow, I feel sorry for some of these people. I know they're not dressed properly and stuff. But then I went home to Joliet and they were going to have a homecoming for me. And so I had a buddy of mine who was a cop that was going to come and pick me up and take me to, so I said, I go, hey, Fitz, are there like some people there, because I don't want to walk into an empty room. And they had it out at Jefferson Square Mall, which had a big, huge middle part. And it was the whole mall on the inside was packed.
Oh my
people
God.
For people. It was just, just overwhelming, emotional. And just, so you could look out and you say, man, things will never be the same.
That is amazing. You're listening to the Zorich podcast with Notre Dame alum and obvious Super Bowl champion Tom Thayer. Now, I'm going to fast forward a little bit because this is when myself and Mike Stonebreaker had a chance to to get to know you. So we're rookies in 91, and lovable Tom Thayer really literally reached out his arms and kind of embraced us. And I say that because by far, Tom was the hardest worker on the Chicago Bears. And it was interesting because I thought, hey, you know, I'm a good guy in the weight room. I can lift some weight. And I just remember you literally spending hours and hours. And after everybody left, it was you and Clyde, who was our strength coach. They're still lifting. Like, I'm in the shower leaving. I'm thinking, hey, I put good 2 hours in after practice, and Tom is still there. So this is who I aspire to, and I do remember, you know, you having some great advice for us, and really that's really, it's, hey man, this is a business, and you know, every play has to be your best, and I'll never forget that because, you know, I had some success at Notre Dame, and we won a national championship, and I'm a hometown kid. I mean, this is going to be great, and
Ditka loved you.
He did. I was very lucky. But the idea that after the conversation with you, it was like, whoa, this is serious. And yep. I mean, it was like literally you opened up my mind. And one of the things, and you're definitely not going to remember this, but and this is after all the great sports advice and everything else you gave us, you're like, do not buy a car. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, I got money now. I'm going to buy a car. He said, Chris, do not buy a car. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And you pulled me aside and said, hey, man, you know, there's people that will trade your tickets for the use of an automobile. And I was like, bullshit, you're crazy. You introduced me to some folks. I did not own a car so I played for 7 years. My last year is 97. I did not own a car until 1999 because of you. Now, not that you would remember that conversation, but it was just really kind of giving me the ins and outs of being successful. And you know, it wasn't about, I mean, it was about all the off the field stuff that you talked about. And I remember, I mean, I had a place, but I remember, you know, Stoney lived with you for a while. Yeah. And I mean, I kind of wish I was in college with you because I could imagine what your parents did after games and tailgating. But after games, like, I would go down and your parents would be like cooking food. It was like this awesome thing ever. And it was just a great experience, but I felt this love from your whole family. And really it was great because, like, even though it was a business, for me, finding kind of a home, and your mom was obviously awesome, but really kind of, even though we would butt heads against each other every day in practice, you beat the shit out of me. But afterward, you know, you were that guy who literally kind of kept me up, patted me on my shoulder. Hey, you can do it. I didn't play at all my first 2 years. You know, I would look at you, I'd talk to you, and you know, you hang in there. And it was so great that even though we battled against each other every day, you were still willing to kind of lend that support. And that's why, I mean, you literally, and although Mike Singletary was my idol playing, I mean, you have done more for my football career than obviously you would ever know. But just spending those few minutes with me after you beat the crap out of me in practice, you and Jay, it was amazing. And so that taught me how to compete, and that taught me how you can respect your opponent, because we battled. We battled every day in practice, but after practice, and I was pissed, but after practice, you know, you put your arm on my shoulder and, you know, hit me, and I was like, man, this is a great guy. And literally you taught me the character of being a professional athlete.
Well, you know, I think that was instilled in us in our background, because I think what you become as a part of your background, and, you know, so you and your mom grew up together in the circumstances you grew up in. I grew up with my mom and dad, married 68 years, still live in the same house I was born and raised in. We adopted 3 kids in a 2.5 bedroom house. So I mean, two bathroom, 2.5 bedroom house. And we fit 8 people in there, or 8 kids and my mom and dad. So we had similarities in our background. So I think that's one of the things that why we gravitated towards Notre Dame, or why we gravitated towards each other, is because you could set aside what we had to do in order to be a football player,
Sure.
but how we should act as humans off the field. And yeah, there's times, man, I wanted to kick you right in the side of the head, or jump on you, or throw you down, but that was your work ethic, and that's why you were where you were. So, I mean, I think our background had a lot to do with the appreciation for the investments that we made into the game.
Well, I do have to say that for me, it was a really special feeling, because everybody would give a shit that we're from Notre Dame. And it was almost like, even though we had this bond, and it seemed like everybody was freaking jealous of it, right? And again, not that you would know this, but the idea that, like, oh yeah, you Domers stick together, but whatever. And it was almost like, and I felt like, man, I was like, yeah, I got a big, and of course I would never tell anybody this, but it was like, man, I have a big brother on this team who's watching out for me. And it's kind of what you were saying, you know, it's this idea of us having a similar background, having that experience at Notre Dame. And literally, folks, you really have to understand this. We would literally beat the crap out of each other for hours at practice. And then, you know, after practice, you know, we would talk crap or do whatever. But the idea was that, you know, you taught me how to be a pro. And that was, it was special for me, because, you know, I mean, I was undersized. I didn't think I was ever going to make. I thought I was going to get kept every year, but I could always look up to you and kind of talk to you, and you would encourage me and everything else. And so for me, it was a great experience. And when you left, you know, I was dejected. It was as if literally I lost my brother on the team. But it was funny, because my attitude changed after that, because, and I wound up getting cut a couple years later. But it was so interesting, because I remember when I got cut, for me, it was like, football was so special, being in Chicago and being around people like you, that, I mean, I was good. I mean, I'd already started law school, but for me, it was this idea of family and brotherhood. And when you weren't there anymore, and again, you don't know this, so you're probably freaking out going, dude, you're a psycho. But for me, I needed that, right? Because didn't have a mom, didn't have a dad, and I was kind of searching for this person who they were willing to give of themselves, even though they were teaching me. And so, you know, for me, it was like, man, football is in Chicago, and I'm not in Chicago anymore. So I actually kind of retired early, but I remember kind of thinking about that after he got cut, thinking like, man, this is bullshit. Our head coach is an idiot. It's the freaking hardest working dude on the team, and you guys cut him. But that was just my opinion.
Yeah, you know, that's kind of the road that we're all going to go through unexpectedly, because we don't know how anything's going to end. But, you know, the thing about, you mentioned Mike Singletary earlier, and Mike Singletary is just a great example, and he has a lot of similarities to you. He's an undersized guy, came in a little bit underappreciated because they didn't know how he'd be able to play with his size.
Right.
And then he showed his enthusiasm for the game. He showed that he's one of the most hardworking, professionally prepared athletes I've ever met in my life. And for you to be in the same huddle with a guy like that, Mike still inspires me. I enjoy Mike Singletary. He is an interesting quality human being to talk to and have real conversations with. And, you know, I think you benefited for that, because, you know, I was the big brother looking out for you, where Mike was that defensive teammate that always wanted Chris Zorich to be the best football player he could be.
Sure.
And that helps Mike Singletary be the best football player he can be.
Sure. All right, so I'm done fawning all over you, so I do apologize about that. Sorry. Okay, so now, and I know we're actually going a little bit over an hour here, but I want to talk about you making a transition from being a great athlete to being a great radio. And I mean, how does that happen? I mean, you have to tell me, I mean, because there's no way. Now, mind you, when I was with you, you weren't the most vocal person in the locker room at all. So then all of a sudden I turn around and you're an analyst for the Bears. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, where did Tom get this voice that everybody loves and appreciates? And I am one of them who turns off the volume on the TV and I listen to you guys. So tell us about that transition from being an athlete to being in the booth.
I volunteered when I got done playing, and I met a guy from Fox TV, and I said, I'm willing to do anything that you need. And and so he goes, hey, have you ever done sidelines for a game before? And I said, no. And he says, all right, drive to Indianapolis. We have a preseason game tonight, and you're going to do sideline reports 3 different times during the course of the game.
What?
And I go, all right. And so they said, formulate what you want to say for this period of time. But it was a preseason game. They could have cut me off if I was had nothing to say.
But Tom, this is not. I mean, they didn't just give anybody a mic. I mean, did you think about that? I mean, did you major in communication in school? I mean, like, did you take a class? I mean,
well, you know what? I
did you want to do this?
I did. I did after I was done, because when I was playing, I really thought I was going to go into professional wrestling. I thought I was going to stay. I thought I was going to stay big and get into that, because that's when Jimbo Covert wrestled in WrestleMania along with William Perry, Steve Ming wrestled. But then, right when I retired, I went out to Hawaii and I stayed out there for 5 months and started surfing.
Okay.
And I lost all the weight because I had another year in my contract and I didn't want to be tempted to go back and play. So when I came back to Chicago, I happened to be at Gary Fensick's house, and I met somebody in the TV business, and he goes, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I don't know, I maybe talk radio or get in. And he goes, well, if you want to try sidelines, I could give you an opportunity, but it's going to be volunteer. So I said, fine, let's go. Let's go with it. So I went to a preseason game like on a Thursday night in Indianapolis. I went to a Chicago game that weekend, and that, the rest was opportunity.
Okay, so you went from the sideline. Now, this is with Fox, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so you've done that. Now you've become the villain who players literally hate the media now, so now you become one of them. And what's that transition from being or working on? I mean, did you do any TV, or did you literally just go from the sideline to the booth?
I went from sidelines to the booth, Chris, but I invested so much time in watching tape. I watched it every single day, every single practice, every single drill, every single game of you and the opponent. So what I was saying, I had video evidence. I was standing at practice every day. So it wasn't like I was just flying in and doing the games, or I was just, kind of traveling around. I was there. I watched as much. I still do. I still watch every single bit of tape that goes on in order to be prepared for what we have to do. And it's the same thing with Jeff. Jeff Joniak is an incredibly hard-working guy, and we kind of challenge each other.
So what did you learn from Jeff? What did you learn
What's
from
that?
Jeff? What did you learn from Jeff?
Oh, my God. Just preparedness, enunciation, diving into the background of these players so you kind of have a better understanding of what they've been able to accomplish as a young man, as a young kid, as a young person, what their background is, learn more about the person than just the game. But I knew the game, I studied the game, I continue to study the game. So he kind of took it a little bit more personal for me than just, you go into the defensive line meeting room and me going to the offensive line meeting room. and then coming out a couple hours later,
Right.
there was more to it.
So, I mean, so with, how can I word this? So the idea that you're part, and now you got to understand, I mean, we did not like the media. I mean, and I know, we just didn't, because we just thought they were a bunch of, well, I can't say what we thought they were,
Right.
but what I like, again, I'm going to fawn over you a little bit, I mean, you literally bring a perspective of not only a player, but really someone who's experienced, someone who had to work hard in order to get what they got. And so when I hear you talk about players, when I hear you analyze plays, it's great for me because I wasn't that, I didn't have that football sense. And obviously you did, but hearing it, the way you talk about it even helps me understand, even though I'm listening in the car, sometimes I can envision from what your description is. And I know that has to be from your playing days, from you watching film. So the fact that you are a great announcer for the radio, for me, it's helpful, but more importantly for the average fan, you have to get tons and tons of fan mail that say, Tom, I totally understand what's going on because you broke it down for me.
Well, you know, I don't speak in complicated terms. I'm not going to sit here and use a bunch of football jargon that you got to be a head coach to understand what you're saying. You know, here they are in 13 personnel, and now they're going to – no. They got 3 tight ends, and they got 1 running back. All right? I'm not – again, and I think that's more of the common ground between us. As I got to speak football as if I'm talking to my mom listening to it on a transistor radio or any other Bears fan that's listening to the game. It's not trying to be, you know, overcomplicated that you know, the words just go in one ear and out the other.
Okay, so this has been a very interesting several months for any professional team. But, I mean, as you see what's going on with professional football in this time of COVID, I mean, canceling preseason games, getting players being having multiple tests. I mean, do you think, from your experience, that we're going to have a football season? Or, I mean, is it something like, yeah, we're going to have it, but we're going to have 1,000, literally, you're going to have to walk through a maze in order to be allowed to play? I mean, what's your opinion on what's going on?
Well, I think it's going to be about the consciousness of every guy when they leaves the facility. You know, Chris, when you look at hockey and the contact that hockey has, and they've been in a bubble and they've been able to do it safely, NBA having no positive testing. Then you have the example of baseball. You have a couple guys that go out socially, and then all of a sudden they infect other members of their team. So if, you know, I was writing something today about training camp this year, and I said the most difficult training camp this year is going to be your day off, because you're going to be tempted to do so many things outside the facility.
Sure. That
if you're not smart, you're not protective, you don't think your time is long, you think maybe I'm on the cusp of getting cut, then you're not worried. I'm not worried about these guys. So it is going to take a lot of just self-police, and I don't want to say self-policing, but self-preservation, a conscious effort to stay away from people. Or if you do, you have to, you know, follow the protocol of wearing the mask and everything. I think if sports life is important to you, that you're willing to do what it takes in order to be healthy and ready to go. So do I think it can happen? I do. But then again, it's going to be about what they do outside of the facility on their day off or just the downtime they have.
So that's on the professional level. I'm sure you've seen what's going on with college. I mean, what do you think about some of the big conferences bowing out, some of the big conferences saying, hey, we're going to play? I mean, what's your take on the college thing?
You know, I feel sad for the kids that aren't going to have an opportunity to play their senior year. I wish they would play, because sometimes I think that college players have a chance to be in a healthy, a safer surrounding when they are. When I was at Notre Dame and I was on campus, I felt protected by the shield of the Golden Dome and a Notre Dame campus.
Sure.
When you put these kids in athletic dorms, you put them on campus, you occupy their attention and their mind, I think it's a healthier atmosphere. For me, if I was 17, 19 years old and I was going to college on my iPad, I don't know what that would have done to me. So I think it's super challenging to the young people in the world that I think it's super unfortunate that they're not going to play in some of the conferences.
So the idea of playing in a bubble, the idea of being safe, that's all we're trying to do. So, what does a bubble look like for the Chicago Bears and NFL team? What does a bubble look like versus what hockey and what basketball is doing?
Well, hockey and basketball, they're all contained into a central location. Right. They're housed inside. For the NFL, maybe it would be a team that lives in a hotel for this period of time. And, hey, if they want to live with their family, but they have to be, inside that bubble and have as equally as important. Maybe it's like baseball's considering. Once they get to the playoffs, and they'll bubble all the playoff teams to keep that environment safe. But, when you go to New England has a hotel that's attached to their stadium. If you want to have a bubble in the NFL and have a realistic opportunity, that would be it. Robert Kraft has the means. He has the ability to support a team under bubble circumstances. But, it's so important for these guys to be able to go home and support their wife and their kids and the decisions that they have to help make in a family. But to me, I think the players that are in that state of life probably will have a safer approach to their downtime than if you and I were 19, 20, 22 years old.
Sure.
A little bit harder.
Okay, so, and again, I've taken up way too much of your time, so I do apologize. I do want to talk a little Bears. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy going on with the quarterback position. I don't know if you've seen any of the practices, but how do you think that's going to turn out?
I love it, man. Chris, how many times have you been on a football team when there's an announced quarterback battle months before training camp is going to start? Rarely to never. And there is no contract attachment here. There is no how much this guy is making, where the loyalties are from the coaching staff. This is an open competition, and I love it, man. But they're two different, you got Nick Foles, who probably sees the downfield threat a little bit more efficiently through his experiences, where Mitchell Trubisky is probably a better athlete than Nick Foles. So, you're trying to feed the system to two different quarterbacks that run it differently. So that'll complicate it for the coaches. But to me, I'm still a fan of Mitchell Trubisky. I'm still in camp Mitch. But I think if you play with that, with that, pitchfork to your back and everything's got to go forward, I think Mitch can be as, destructive with his legs as any other element that could help him in the other parts of his game that he has, perceived question marks.
Okay, so with everything that's going on, and I know you so do not have a crystal ball, and I know you hate doing this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Can you give us a prediction on what you think the season will look like? There's so many variables right now. So we don't even have a quarterback yet, right? So what are the variables? I'm sorry, not what are the variables, but with all the craziness, where do you see the season going?
Well, say hypothetically that we play all 16 games.
Sure.
If the Bears stay healthy on defense, Chris, you're talking about a playoff caliber defense right now.
Right.
So if you go out to practice and you're Matt Nagy and his offensive staff and you think one quarterback has an advantage over the other, you got to make that call as quickly as possible, because you don't have 4 preseason weeks in order to get the quarterback ready. While you're installing the system in full pads starting Monday, you also have to start putting together a game plan for Detroit week 1. So you know how it is in the quarterback position. You go out there and you call the play, and there's an exact science to the offensive play. And you know the timing in which that play should be run and where the ball's supposed to go. So it's going to be easy for the coaches to decide who is running the offense more efficiently. And then, you know, the decision is going to have to be made. But it's going to be that backup quarterback is going to have to stay true to that position according to the process, because they have to improve. They got to get better. They got to be supportive to the quarterback they start, because no telling when you're going to get an opportunity to get in there and play.
I mean, how are they going to divide the snaps? I mean, you know this. I mean, literally, it's scripted, and there's only time for the starting quarterback has 8 snaps or 12 snaps, and the number 2 guy has 3. I mean, how's that going to work? Because it was funny because you knew when we were playing, you knew who was going to play and who wasn't going to play, because literally our snaps are scripted, and there's only a certain number, and if you're not in that high number, you're not playing. I mean, just period. So how do they get a productive practice with both quarterbacks getting, even snaps?
Well, yeah, that's a good way. It's going to be the guy that will suffer that losing some snaps in the Bears' teamwork will be Tyler Bray, the third quarterback, because all the other snaps will go 50-50 to Mitch and Nick. But so I could script plays for Mitchell Trubisky on a Monday, and then I could go out and evaluate how he performed in those snaps I scripted for him. And you could script those exact same plays the next day for Nick. Now, how did Nick do these same plays, and what did he accomplish? And so there's a formula that they can go out and figure out which quarterback is performing different. It's like the period 7-on-7, where you go out there and you're just throwing the ball to the receivers against defensive backs and linebackers. There's a process of perfection to that drill. I never paid attention to it because I hated it and I thought it was kind of monotonous. But Monday, when I go to practice and they're in full pads, I'm going to pay attention to 7-on-7 like I never have before, because I think it can tell you a lot about the way the quarterbacks are seeing football. And so some of these drills I didn't pay attention to in the last 30 years. I will this year like never before.
That is awesome. All right, and we're going to wrap this up because I've taken so much of your time. But I want to ask you one more last question. So what does a current Tom Thayer, through your life experiences, what does that Tom Thayer tell a 17, 18-year-old freshman at Notre Dame? Who's Tom Thayer? So you're telling, what do you tell yourself at 18?
Stay academically eligible. And again, I'm not shooting for A's and B's. I'm shooting for academic eligibility because, again, it was a struggle for me. It was not something that school didn't come easy to me, but the weight room came easy to me.
Sure.
Football came easy to me. I loved it more than anything else. So how badly I wanted to be involved in football, it put a positive pressure on me academically because it made me follow through diligently. I went to class every day, and that was the thing at Notre Dame. Your classes were small enough that if you weren't there, Professor Mike DeChico was calling you by the time your class was over, asking you where you are. So, Chris, too, is, like I said, my mom and dad never went to college. My older sisters never went to college because we came from a working family. And being the youngest in my family, and I did graduate from college, so did my brother, every other member of my family went on to graduate from college. And so that's probably the more important legacy that you want to leave to your family, is that it can be done. It can start with our generation and it can continue from there. So, like I said, I love my Super Bowl ring, but damn, I love my diploma. And it sounds corny, but it means a lot to me. And I don't care if your diploma wherever it's from.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
it's that accomplishment of, it's that accomplishment of earning that.
Tom, you've been great. I mean, having a chance to speak to a lifelong mentor for me, but more importantly, there's so many more things we could have talked about. Hawaii, we could have talked about you surfing, which I can't even imagine, but I hear you're good at it. I mean, there's so much more we could do. So please promise me that in the future you'd come back on, we could have a Tom Thayer Part 2.
Yeah, anytime, Chris. Anytime. I enjoy seeing you. And again, I'm a huge fan of Chris Zorich. I always have been. I think, was it the Orange Bowl that you guys got screwed in?
Yes. Well, yes.
Golly.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Yeah, bad flag.
And it's funny because you mentioned that. So in 93, 92, I'm not sure what year it was, but it was the game against Boston College. They had, no, I think it was 93 because they beat Florida State the week before that. And I forgot who we were playing, but it was me and Tom Waddle because he went to Boston College.
Right.
And we were kind of hovering because it was an away game, and we were kind of hovering around the maintenance guys who had a TV like in their like little cage at whatever stadium we were at, and we're kind of going back and forth to watch like the walkthrough because we weren't involved in it. And then I think it was a missed field goal, and I know my Notre Dame fans are going to kill me, but and Tom was like, yeah, and I was like, man, and Dave, who was a coach, Dave Wannstedt, the coach, he kind of looked around to see who was making that noise because we were supposed to be at practice kind of watching it.
Right.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because I totally was such a fan back after I left. Tom, it has been great. Again, I mean, anytime I have the chance to kind of let people know how important they were in my life, I do, because life is so short. I would obviously like to say condolences. You unfortunately lost your both parents recently,
Yep.
which I can't even imagine how that was. So the idea that we are still one big happy family is important to me, and I want to thank you for taking out time this evening to kind of hang out and talk to us a little bit.
Anytime. I really appreciate you, Chris. I appreciate you having me, and best of luck. And I know we'll talk soon.
Yes, we will. I'd like to thank everyone who's watched on Facebook Live, and most of all, my wonderful producer / wife, Candy, I would not be able to do this because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, so she's kind of really helped me out. And if you want to check out this interview with some other interviews that we've done, please go to my YouTube page at Chris Zorich 50. And if you like it, please subscribe. Again, Tom, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for watching. And go Irish. Tom, thank you so much. Man. This was awesome.
You're welcome. See you, buddy.
You got it, bro.
Adios.
Yep.